On the evening of the same day, 3rd June, following a gramophone recording of a Chopin Polonaise, the Viceroy announced the plan in slow, deliberate phrases on All India Radio. Then Pandit Nehru spoke in both English and Hindi. He said, "We are little men serving great causes, but because the cause is great, something of that greatness falls on us also." Then Qaeda spoke of the momentous decisions, the grave issues, and the complex political problem. His speech was in English and it had to be translated into Urdu so that Muslims all over India could know that he had won them their nation. Jinnah besought his listeners to galvanize and concentrate all their energies to see that the transfer of power was made in a peaceful and orderly manner. He said also, "The world has no parallel for the most onerous and difficult task which we have to perform." Then he paid Lord Mountbatten a tribute, no doubt sincere but also mixed with diplomatic hope for the days to come. He said, "I must say that I feel that the Viceroy has battled against various forces very bravely, and the impression that he has left on my mind is that he was actuated by a high sense of fairness and impartiality, and it is up to us now to make his task less difficult and help him as far as lies in our power." At the end of the speech, carefully written and rehearsed, Jinnah was suddenly spontaneous. He raised his voice and said, "Pakistan Zindabad," which was not in the script. On 10 and 13 June, the plan was ratified, respectively, by the Muslim League and Congress. By 20 July, the free will of the people was known. The Muslims in British India, including the proud, sturdy Pathans of the Northwest, where the Congress party had been influential for so long, had overwhelmingly endorsed the plan for Pakistan. The map of India was to be changed. The massive red pear that had been an ornament in English atlases for almost a century was now to be sliced, but not merely in two. A country half the size of the United States, but with 2.5 times its population, was to be divided so that Hindu India would form a gigantic wedge 1,000 miles wide between East and West Pakistan. It was as if George Washington had united California and Massachusetts into one state, with an alien nation spread between. The two Muslim territories speaking different languages, one facing the east, the other the west, to be permitted no land communication, where the Pakistan that Jinnah had won. The only bounds between the two great territories were a fierce wish to be rid of Hindu domination and their belief in Islam. The frontiers for this division were defined by a boundary commission under Sir Cyril Radcliffe, a choice to which Quaid-e-Azam agreed. Sir Cyril Radcliffe's task was prodigious. Whatever he drew his timid lines on the map, he was sure to offend. The Qaid was shocked by the award. He spoke of the grave injustice to Pakistan. But even over such a fearful dispute as this, he was strictly constitutional. He had accepted Sir Cyril Radcliffe as chairman of the Boundary Commission, therefore, he accepted his verdict as an advocate before his judge. When Jinnah's associates urged him to protest, he answered, "No, we agreed to arbitration. We must abide by that arbitration." The army, the navy, and the air force and the assets of British India were also to be divided. Older British officers who had served in India for the better part of their lives, proud of their Muslims, Sikh, and Hindu troops, as a general might be proud of a regiment drawn into one tradition from England, Scotland, and Wales, had to submit to their soldiers being distributed according to their religion. Lord Ismay protested against this breaking up of the forces on communal lines. He said to Quaid-e-Azam, "You have probably the finest army in the world, with tremendous prestige in the battlefield. It will be tragic if you do not keep them as now, with their wonderful regimental tradition." He reminded the Qaid, "An army is not just a collection of men with rifles and swords, it is a living entity, with one heart, one soul, one brain, and one set of organs. If you perform a surgical operation, you will kill it." Jinnah answered, "You do not understand the psychology of these people, these opposed people." So the soldiers were shared out with their guns and their ammunition, and they became enemies. The aircraft and the ships of the Royal Indian Navy were dealt out. like cards in a game. Those ships that arrived in the port of Karachi had not among them a barrel of fuel or oil left. They had to lie and wait defenseless beside the docks. Such trivial objects as desks and typewriters had also to be distributed. And in this game of one for you and two for me, the Muslims were at a disadvantage. The little officials, the managers, and clerks in India had been mostly Hindus, who have an aptitude for busyness and petty authority. The Muslims lacked these talents, and when they ultimately unpacked their share of the sad trophies of freedom in the cities and towns of the new Pakistan, they found that they had been given little out of which to create the offices of government. More serious than the ships, the aircraft, or the typewriters was the equipment of hospitals, which had also to be shared. In Karachi, the few harassed doctors found that vital parts of surgical apparatus had been removed. With more zeal than skill or experience, the technicians had to prepare the hospitals for the throngs of maimed and dying refugees who poured into the capital. Quaid had mentioned the onerous and difficult tasks to be performed. He had also appealed for peace and order, words that were as ineffectual as feathers in a storm. 14 million people were to move across the new frontiers, one way or the other, before Jinnah died 13 months after partition. The first of these millions began to pack their dusty treasures into bundles within an hour of the Viceroy's broadcast. Fear, like some terrible, unnatural monsoon, lay dark and heavy over all India. In late June and July, the fear begat slaughter. An Englishman standing at a window in a certain city saw a hefty docked hand, armed with his big steel cargo hook. The man realized his strength. He rent the clothes and ripped the body of a woman who happened to be standing nearby. Then he repeated the horror on five others as he walked up the street. Sir Francis Tucker's book, While Memory Serves, describes some of the terrors and illustrates them with photographs that are appalling. The multitudes moving east met the multitudes moving west. They were frenzied, bewildered, and without pity, and most of the men were armed. The British were quitting India at last. Those that remained did what they could to hold back the bloody stampede, but they had become futile before such a holocaust. They were aliens, without authority, in a chaotic land. All they could do was to pack and return to the west. The killing was horrible to Muhammad Ali Jinnah, who had always been repelled by frenzy and cruelty. He was still in his house in Delhi when the reports of slaughter were brought to him, but he was helpless, exhausted by the long struggle of words, already emaciated by his stealthy disease, and unable to lessen the agony of his people must pass through to achieve the land he had promised them. Perhaps he had envisaged the strange darkness that was the inevitable price of what he had set out to create 4 years earlier. At the Delhi session of the Muslim League, he had said of Pakistan, "It may come in my lifetime or not. You will remember these words of mine. I say this with no ill will or offense. Some nations have killed millions of each other, and yet an enemy of today is a friend of tomorrow. That is history."